services, click on our icon at TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
Your information station, WTIM.
It's the WTIM Morning Show. I'm Avery Cooper. Your stream brought to you by Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark and People's Bank and Trust. They put people first. You can find those video streams online on the TaylorvilleDailyNews.com Facebook or on YouTube at WTIM TV. Here on the phone, I have University of Illinois Springfield Professor Emeritus of Political Science, Dr. Kent Redfield. Thank you so much for being here again. Let me try that again. I have Professor Emeritus of Political Science, Dr. Kent Redfield, on the phone. Great. Thank you so much for being here, Kent.
Good to be here.
All right. We are on the same page now. I've pressed all the correct buttons, and we're well underway. So one of the things going on in the last few weeks, Dr. Redfield, the General Assembly went back for a veto session. One of the big things they paid attention to, the Safe T Act. And I know they originally talked about making some amendments. What were those amendments, and did they ever get anything done?
Well, they did pass, depending on your perspective, a kind of either a cleanup bill or essentially they went back and looked at some of the issues that were raised during the political campaign about some ambiguities within the act. But I mean, we're basically the crux of this is the elimination of cash bail and substituting a process where there's kind of a presumption on low-level kinds of misdemeanors that people are not going to be, they're going to be released, and you're not going to have to pay cash bail in order to get out. And then for more serious crimes, you're going to be able to hold people and essentially, as the Democrats would have put it, not buy your way out of jail. The issues here are that we're trying to make trade-offs between kind of getting a system that doesn't penalize people for being poor that get involved with the criminal justice system and with the presumption of innocence versus the need for the community to be safe. You want to keep people that are arrested for dangerous violent crimes. You want to keep them incarcerated before trial, so that they're you're not getting additional violence and crime. There obviously are different perspectives on this, and you're making trade-offs between two pretty important kinds of values. One of the big problems is the Democrats have such an overwhelming majority that they kind of pushed through a bill and said, with a delayed effective date, and there was a lot of pushback that they didn't get a lot of input from not only Republicans but law enforcement. We'll see how well they address that. I mean, the critical thing will be what happens after the 1st of January.
You mentioned the trade-off here between the two different schools of thought here, keeping the community safe and keeping those incarcerated to prevent further crime from happening, but also decriminalizing being poor in a way. Governor J.B. Pritzker called this bill and the passing and all the amendments a great success. I guess a great success for who? What school of ideology does that support?
Well, I mean, the governor would contend that you can, in fact, do both things, that you can keep people safe and make the system more just for people who are, in fact, innocent until proven guilty. And so, it's pretty clear that in some cases cash bail works against people that are poor, and they tend to not be able to make bail. And but again, until you see how the system works, and there have been attempts in other states to do this. Some have worked, fairly well. There have been problems with others. And so, this is not, you never write legislation and that's perfect. And so, we're going to have experience here in terms of, how it actually works out. And hopefully there are not horrendous problems that nothing is certainly guaranteed in terms of trying to reconcile these two things. The other thing that's an issue for the state and for the local government, sheriffs, police departments, local courts, is when you can't automatically just go to a list and say, this is worth $1,000 worth of bail. When you have to go in and make an evaluation, that takes more training, it takes more time, it takes money. And so, there's an obligation on state government to make sure that local law enforcement and the local courts have the resources that will allow them to, put the time into, the idea is to have a more just system, but that doesn't come free. If, you can't, you have to be able to have sufficient personnel in the court system and sufficient training and funding for local law enforcement to make it work. So, this is the beginning. This is not the end. This is not like we've declared something and now we'll just go on to the next thing. This is going to be an ongoing issue. We'll probably be talking about the Safety Act when we get to the 2024 election.
And you mentioned the county and local government too. That's seems to be a big driver, for lack of a better term, for the controversy surrounding the Safety Act. States attorneys from Democrat and Republican parties are screaming, "Hey, I don't really know how this is going to impact my community. I have concerns about it." And I suppose with those concerns, you mentioned talking about it up until 2024. So when's the next time that the General Assembly will have a chance to take a look at the Safety Act?
I suspect you're not, unless there's some major glitch when this gets rolled out. And they tried to clarify what happens with people that are currently in jail who, are there because, they can't make bail, essentially. What's going to happen to them? And that there was an attempt to clarify that. If there are major glitches in that, and after the first of the year, then it will, those will have to be addressed. Assuming that this is kind of working at some level where there are no major disasters, I doubt if you're going to see, you're going to have to get 6 months, a year's worth of experience underneath it. But, and we should point out all of the major law enforcement groups, essentially the people that have been opposing it essentially did not oppose it. They've been some groups endorsed it that it may have been opposed to it. Mostly it was just this situation where they said, we're not going to oppose it. We understand what you're trying to do. We still got concerns, but let's put it into effect and see what happens. And so I don't expect we're going to revisit this until probably, until we have a year's worth of experience underneath it. But that's, the law of unintended consequences is a law that legislature can't repeal. And so, it could be that there is something that, nobody's been talking about that needs to be addressed, because this is a complex bill and you have to get people to make it work. And so, you're asking people to shift gears in terms of the way they thought about dealing with arrests and pretrial and incarceration. And so these big changes don't come easy.
That's Professor Emeritus of Political Science with University of Illinois, Springfield, Dr. Kent Redfield. In a moment, he'll talk a little bit about the election results and how Illinois Democrats increased their supermajority, or rather their majority. Is it a supermajority? Well, I guess we'll have to find out here in a moment, here on the WTIM Morning Show. Your stream brought to you by Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark and People's Bank and Trust. They put people first.
If you're 40 and over, you'll recognize these artists by their first names: Frank, Dean, Sammy, Andy, Nat, Diana, Michael. Well, here's the big news. You can now hear Central Illinois' largest music library with over 3,500 songs on air and online at 965thechill.com. Tune in on the FM dial in Christian County and on your computer or smartphone. Hear these great artists and many more 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on 965thechill.com.
This is a station editorial. I'm Randall J. Miller, station president. Well, it's the holiday season, the season of thanks for our many blessings and for the birth of Jesus Christ. Despite another year of rancor and division in our country, we still live in the greatest country in the world, where we can do and say just about anything as long as we follow the rule of law. Not many countries have the freedoms we do, and many times we don't stop and think about it. Time marches on for us all. I thank God for my faith, my family, and for the extended family I have in every one of you, our listeners. I'll be celebrating 50 years in the radio business I love in 2023. I've been blessed to have been part of the Taylorville, Shelbyville, Pana communities with our Taylorville cluster of stations for the past 30 years, and 15 years in our Clinton, Monticello, Lincoln markets. Our two legacy stations this year celebrated anniversaries too. WTIM in Taylorville threw a party in May with the Greater Taylorville Chamber of Commerce to honor that station's 70th anniversary, and WHOW in Clinton is celebrating 75 years of service with a fun evening as well. While all of us have challenges every day, it's important to stop, reflect, and be thankful for all that God has given each of us. May you and your family have a most blessed holiday season, and may the love we share this time of year extend into the new year ahead. Quoting Henry Wadsworth Longfellow from the poem The Harvest Moon, it is the harvest moon on gilded vanes and roofs of villages on woodland crests, and their aerial neighborhoods of nests deserted, on the curtained window panes of rooms where children sleep, on country lanes and harvest fields, its mystic splendor rests. That's our opinion. We welcome yours. Our email address is editorial@randyradio.com. That's editorial@randyradio.com.
By leveraging sustainable carbon management solutions like Navigator CO2's Heartland Greenway, ethanol facilities can make substantial progress toward carbon reduction objectives. Learn more on how they're partnering with ethanol producers across the Corn Belt. Click their icon at TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
The Shelby County Economic Development Corporation aims to foster, promote, and stimulate economic development. They're here to help your business grow. Find out more on the Shelby County Economic Development Corporation by clicking their icon at TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
Your information station, WTIM.
It's the WTIM Morning Show. I'm Avery Cooper. Glad to have you along. Your stream brought to you by Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark and People's Bank and Trust. They put people first. I have Professor Emeritus of Political Science, Dr. Kent Redfield. He's with the University of Illinois Springfield on the phone. And before going to break, we talked a little bit about the SAFE T Act and the Illinois General Assembly veto session and what that all entailed. But now, Dr. Redfield, we haven't had a chance to talk since the election took place earlier in November. So briefly here, tell me some of the results of the election from a statewide basis and how that impacted the Democrat and Republican parties in Illinois.
Big surprise in Illinois was really no surprises. The Democrats are, in a pretty dominant position, and some of that is that they're able to draw the legislative maps. I mean, the one this is the second congressional map in a row that the Democrats have drawn, the third state legislative map, and so they're able to use those maps to increase their influence in the congressional delegation, the legislative delegation. Illinois is probably maybe 55-45, 56-44 kind of state in terms of base vote. And that would be, those are the kinds of numbers you got. All the Democrats won the statewide offices, but they were all in that kind of, 56, 58% range. Well, in the legislature, the Democrats have got 68% of the House seats and 68% of the Senate seats, and in Congress, it's 14-3. They've got 82% of the congressional seats from Illinois. So the maps are a huge problem, and the Democrats at the moment have a fundraising advantage, mostly because the billionaires that have been supporting the Republicans, particularly Ken Griffith, have kind of disengaged while J.B. Pritzker's still there. So, the result is the Democrats pretty much have their way in the legislature, and because of the way the partisan, the votes are distributed statewide, that means that downstate Illinois, that doesn't have, a huge voice if the Democrats really want to flex their muscle, and so that's a concern. And the Safety Act was an example of the Democrats having enough votes to muscle a bill through, and then without any kind of Republican input. And now you've got some talk about some assault weapon ban, raising the age of someone could have a FOID card, some gun control legislation that people are starting to talk about. And if you only need 30 votes, the Democrats can lose 10 senators and still pass something. If you only need 60 votes, the Democrats can lose 18 members and still pass something. So getting bipartisanship is difficult because of the huge majorities, and I think the Safety Act is a clear example of how you had problems that probably weren't necessary if you'd have had a more bipartisan effort to try and find more common ground. You'd at least eliminated some of the confusion.
Here in Christian County, Kent, not a single Democrat won an election here. I mean, there are still Democrats in county government, but anybody identifying as a Democrat lost, and one independent. So, in other words, is another way to say Republicans swept here in Christian County. I guess from an outside point of view, what do you think is happening in county governments like rural Christian County, where Republicans are just, I mean, it seems like they're dominating, and yet on a statewide level, doesn't seem like Illinois will go red anytime soon.
No, and that's the we're very regional in terms of, if you look at the statewide map, downstate is becoming more Republican every election cycle. I mean, when I got here in '75, we had a lot of downstate Democrats, and we've had a decrease in manufacturing, a decrease in mining, and a shift in the parties, so that the Democratic Party has become much more progressive, and that means the Democrats that are left downstate and the few senators and reps that are Democrats tend to be with the urban areas: Rockford, Quad Cities, Peoria, Metro East, that sort of thing. And then the rest of the state is, it's downstate is very Republican, very rural. So when we draw these maps, and with the Democrats in control, they draw very tight districts around those few urban areas, and that's, so you get this real polarization, and it's very difficult when you don't have competing voices. Competition, and that helps. Bipartisanship helps, and we're just becoming more and more polarized. And unfortunately, the demographics, all of the growth outside of some places in the Metro East and say the Champaign area, is not, all the growth is up in the suburbs,
Right.
And they are turning more, that's where the battleground is, and they're turning more Democratic. We've got a DuPage County has a DuPage County chairman.
That's Dr. Kent Redfield. I appreciate your time.
Okay, always good to talk to you.
The Big 870 WTIM Assumption Taylorville, 96.1 W241 CF Taylorville, 107.5 W298 CD Shelbyville, 107.9 W300 EH Payne and Nokomis.